Justin Bieber didn't just stay quiet, he refused. And according to reports, that decision didn't sit well with certain people behind the scenes because this wasn't just about Diddy, it was about a bigger push happening at the same time. One insider's claim involved multiple voices trying to shape the narrative before things got worse, and Bieber didn't play along. Now, nothing here has been officially confirmed, but sources are saying the tension didn't come from nowhere. It may have started when Bieber was asked to speak out publicly, not against anything but in support of someone at the center of everything. And that's where Usher's name comes in, because if these reports are true, the real conflict wasn't public, it happened privately. Quiet conversations, pressure behind closed doors, and Bieber pushing back may have been the moment everything shifted, because once you look at what was being asked and what he allegedly refused to do, it raises a much bigger question. Was this just about loyalty, or was this about control over the entire story? Stay with me, because what's being said about that moment and what it connects to from Bieber's past changes everything.
It was hard for me being that young and being in the industry and not knowing where to turn, and everyone, telling me they love me and, just turn their back on you in a sec.
At first, people thought this was random. Just another industry moment, two artists not seeing eye to eye, nothing serious. But according to multiple reports circulating online, that's not what was happening behind the scenes, because the real issue may have started at a private event where the conversations weren't public, but the pressure reportedly was. And sources are claiming Justin Bieber was being encouraged to speak out, not against anything but in support of Diddy, and not casually either. The way it's being described, this wasn't just a suggestion. It felt more like a coordinated push, a moment where certain voices were trying to shape the narrative before things got worse. Now, to be clear, none of this has been officially confirmed, but when you look at the timing, interviews dropping, statements aligning, and multiple figures suddenly echoing similar talking points, it starts to raise questions, because around that same time Usher publicly spoke about Diddy in a way that caught people off guard, acknowledging controversy but still emphasizing respect for his legacy. And if Bieber was expected to do the same and didn't, then that's where things may have shifted, because insiders are saying that's when the situation turned tense, not loud, not public, but personal. And if that's true, then this wasn't just about loyalty, it was about control, and what Bieber allegedly refused to do next is where everything starts to unravel. And this is where things reportedly escalated, because according to insiders, Justin Bieber didn't just hesitate, he pushed back. Now, nothing here has been officially confirmed, but sources are saying he wasn't comfortable stepping in publicly, especially with everything already surrounding Diddy at the time. And that refusal may have been the turning point, because if this was part of a bigger push to control the narrative, then one major voice staying silent becomes a problem, especially when that voice is Justin Bieber. And suddenly what looked like a simple disagreement starts to feel like something else, not just pressure but expectation. And when Bieber didn't meet it, insiders claim that's when things got personal. Because at that point, it's no longer about what's being said publicly, it's about what's happening behind closed doors. And that's where the story starts connecting to something bigger. Because this isn't the first time Bieber's name has come up in situations like this. And once you look back at how his career actually started, it raises a much bigger question. Because to understand why this moment matters, you have to go back to when Justin Bieber first entered the industry, young, unknown, and surrounded by people who already had power, and one of the biggest names connected to that early phase was Usher. And on the surface, it looked like mentorship, opportunity, a fast track to success. But over time, old interviews and clips started resurfacing, and some of what was said doesn't land the same anymore. Because Usher himself has spoken about being exposed to things early in his career that he didn't fully understand at the time. Nothing confirmed, nothing clearly defined, but enough to make people question what that environment was really like, especially for young artists stepping into it. And when you look at Bieber coming up through that same system, it starts to raise a different kind of question. Not just who was guiding him, but what he was being introduced to. And if Bieber recognized that pattern early, then his reaction now doesn't feel random at all. But here's where it gets more serious. Because some reports suggest this wasn't just something he observed, it may be something he experienced.
I think that I was just, living in this shame, living in all this sort of stuff of my past, and I wasn't able to move on.
The 56-year-old remains at Fort Dix Federal Correctional Institution, a low-security prison located in New Jersey, after he was transferred from the New York Metropolitan Detention Center in late October.
And this is where things start getting uncomfortable, because over the years, certain clips involving Justin Bieber have resurfaced, moments that at the time were brushed off as jokes or just industry behavior, but now people are looking at them differently, especially that early footage of Bieber spending time around Diddy, including references to those 48 hours that were never clearly explained. Now, to be clear, nothing about that situation has been officially confirmed as inappropriate, but the lack of clarity is exactly what keeps the conversation going, because when you connect that to what Usher has said about his own early experiences, and then look at what's allegedly happening now behind the scenes, it starts to feel less like coincidence and more like a pattern people are trying to understand, especially when you consider how young Bieber was at the time, who was around him, and who had influence over his career. So when reports suggest he's now pushing back, staying quiet, refusing to speak out, not playing along, it doesn't look random. It looks intentional, like someone who's seen enough and decided not to participate anymore. But here's the part that makes this even bigger, because if Bieber stepping back disrupted something behind the scenes, then it's not just about him anymore. It's about who needed him to say something and why. Because if Bieber stepping back became a problem, then the real question is who needed him to speak and what was at stake if he didn't. Because this wasn't just about one statement. According to reports, it may have been about influence, and when someone like Justin Bieber speaks publicly, it doesn't just add noise, it shifts perception. Headlines change, narratives move, and at a time when Diddy was facing increasing scrutiny, that kind of support could matter more than people realize. Now, nothing here has been officially confirmed, but insiders are claiming there was a broader push happening behind the scenes. Not just one voice, but multiple. People stepping in trying to shape how things were being seen before it got out of control. And that's where Usher's comments start to stand out. Because while others stayed quiet, he spoke, acknowledging controversy but still defending Diddy's legacy. And if Bieber was expected to follow that same path and didn't, then his silence becomes disruption, because one major voice not aligning creates a gap. And gaps create questions, doubt, attention, and if the goal was to control the narrative, then Bieber stepping back may have done the opposite. But here's where it gets more tense, because when influence doesn't work, pressure usually follows. And according to reports, that's exactly where things may have shifted from influence to pressure. Because when someone doesn't cooperate in situations like this, it doesn't just get ignored, it gets addressed. And insiders are claiming Bieber started pulling back even more, not speaking publicly, not aligning with anyone, keeping his distance, and that kind of silence in an industry built on visibility stands out, especially when other voices are moving in the opposite direction. Now, none of this has been officially confirmed, but sources are saying the tension wasn't just professional, it started feeling personal. Because at that point, it's no longer about what's being said, it's about what's being expected. And if Bieber was being pushed to support something he wasn't comfortable with, then his refusal becomes a problem for more than just one person. It affects everyone trying to keep the narrative intact. And that's when things reportedly got more complicated behind the scenes, because when one piece doesn't fit into the bigger picture, it forces everything else to adjust. And if Bieber refused to play along, then it raises another question: what exactly was at risk if he didn't?
Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs, and he often electronically recorded them. The freak-offs sometimes lasted days at a time.
And that's where this starts getting bigger than just Bieber, because if something was at risk, then it means there was already a narrative in motion, something being built, shaped, and protected. And according to reports, that narrative centered around how Diddy was being seen publicly during one of the most critical moments of his situation, because timing matters, and when multiple voices start speaking at once, using similar language, defending the same points, it doesn't look random, it looks coordinated. Now, none of this has been officially confirmed, but insiders are pointing to the overlap, interviews dropping at the same time, statements aligning, and certain names stepping forward while others stayed silent, and that silence starts to stand out even more, especially when it comes from someone like Bieber, because at that level, silence isn't neutral, it's noticeable. It creates space for questions, and if the goal was to stabilize the narrative, then one major voice not participating could do the opposite. It could shift attention, create doubt, and open the door for people to start looking deeper. And if that's what happened, then Bieber didn't just step back. He may have unintentionally disrupted something much bigger than people realized. And once that disruption happens, it doesn't just stay contained, it starts spreading. Because when one part of the narrative doesn't hold, people begin looking at everything differently, and according to reports, that's exactly what started happening. Old clips resurfacing, past interviews being re-examined, moments that once felt normal now being questioned. Now none of this has been officially confirmed, but the shift in attention is real, because once people start connecting timelines, who was around, what was said, and when it was said, the story starts expanding. And Bieber's silence only adds to that, because instead of clarifying anything, he stepped back completely, and that absence speaks just as loud as any statement, especially in an industry where silence is rarely accidental. And if he chose not to engage at all, then it raises another question. Was he protecting himself, or was he distancing himself from something he didn't want to be tied to anymore? Because at this point, it's no longer just about what happened recently, it's about how far back this situation might actually go. And when you start looking further back, the situation becomes even more complicated. Because this isn't just about one moment or one decision, it's about a pattern that may have been building over time. And according to reports, Bieber has had issues with people from his early career before, questioning contracts, distancing himself from certain figures, and pulling away from the system that helped launch him. Now, none of this has been officially confirmed in this specific situation, but the behavior lines up because when someone begins separating themselves from the same people who once had influence over them, it usually isn't random. It's intentional. And if Bieber has been quietly stepping back for a while, then this moment might not be the beginning. It might just be the point where everything became visible. Because refusing to speak out, staying silent, and keeping distance all signal the same thing, and that's someone choosing not to participate anymore. But here's what makes this even more interesting. Because if Bieber stepping away is part of a bigger shift, then it doesn't just affect him, it affects everyone connected to that same circle.
I hear about my party, they're gonna be shutting them down, they're gonna probably be arresting me, doing all types of crazy things just because we wanna have a good time.
Combs' release date was initially set as May 8, 2028, when he was sentenced last year, but it was later pushed back 1 month to June 4, 2028.
And that's where this starts affecting more than just Bieber. Because if one person at that level pulls back, it forces everyone else in that circle to adjust. And according to reports, that's already starting to happen, people choosing their words more carefully, some staying quiet, others speaking out just enough to protect themselves without getting too involved. Now, none of this has been officially confirmed, but the shift is noticeable, because when a situation like this builds momentum, it creates pressure across the board, not just on one person, and if Bieber stepping back created a gap, then others have to decide whether to fill it or distance themselves from it completely. And that's where things get unpredictable, because not everyone responds the same way when the narrative starts shifting. Some align, some disappear, and some start repositioning before anything becomes official. And if that's happening right now, then this isn't just about a disagreement anymore. It's about an entire network reacting in real time. But here's the part that really stands out, because Bieber isn't saying anything at all. And that silence might be the loudest part of this entire situation, because while everyone else is either speaking, aligning, or carefully choosing their words, Justin Bieber has stepped back completely. No statements, no defense, no involvement, and according to reports, that choice may have disrupted more than people realize. Because if there was a larger push happening behind the scenes than one major voice refusing to participate changes everything, now none of this has been officially confirmed, but the timing, the reactions, and the sudden shift in behavior all raise the same question. Was this just a disagreement, or was this the moment Bieber decided he wasn't going to play along anymore? Because when you look at where he started, who was around him, and what's being said now, it starts to feel like this isn't just about one situation, it's about a bigger pattern people are only now beginning to question, and if that's true, then this story might not be ending anytime soon, it might just be getting started. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, because the more people look into this, the more questions keep coming up.